What's up, everybody? I'm Finn McKenty. This is the Punk Rock MBA, and today we are here to talk about pop music. And if you watch a lot of my videos, I'm guessing that you are probably not exactly the biggest fan of pop, and that is totally okay. You are not obligated to like anything. But assuming that you're not a fan of pop, my question for you is why? Because I've heard pretty much all the reasons why so many rock fans say that pop is terrible. That it's formulaic music that takes no effort, that the lyrics are just dumb, mindless crap to entertain the masses, that it's all fake, put together like a factory assembly line by the same team of producers and songwriters that are behind every top 40 song. And on the other hand, rock and metal are supposedly quote unquote real music, which is the opposite of all that. But is any of that actually true? I would say probably not. There are some kernels of truth to it, but I think it's not quite that simple. And in this video, I will do my best to explain why and hopefully get you to consider maybe giving pop music another chance. And also answer the question that I'm sure many of you are asking right now. Wait a minute, if your channel is called the Punk Rock MBA, why the hell are you talking about pop? Really quick, before we go any further, I wanted to mention my Discord. We are up to over 5,000 people now hanging out, talking every day. It is pretty cool, and if you're watching this video, you are invited. All you need to do is click the link in the description of this video. So first of all, what does pop even mean? Because depending on who you ask, it could mean anything from the Beatles to Britney Spears, right? And those are two very different things. At first, rock and pop were used more or less interchangeably to basically just mean like whatever is popular with mainstream young people, meaning essentially not jazz or classical. But by the late 60s, that kind of changed as rock artists started to kind of distance themselves from pop, to kind of say, no, we're doing something different from that with more integrity and authenticity. And it's actually kind of hard to answer the question of what is pop because it has incredibly wide creative boundaries and borrows from basically every other genre. But for the purposes of this video, I'm going to define pop as any kind of vocal-driven music that sounds like something you might hear on mainstream radio and isn't rock, rap, or country. Although, like I said, there is some overlap there, but we're just going to kind of forget about that for the purposes of this video. And so that means that pop could be anything from really straightforward stuff like Backstreet Boys to stuff that's actually relatively weird like Billie Eilish or Charli XCX. And yes, there is a lot of pop that is honestly just straight up trash. I'm not here to tell you that LMFAO or Right Said Fred are actually these like underappreciated geniuses. They're not. But there's crap in every genre, right? So why do people tend to single out pop as being like the worst genre of music? Well, I asked on Twitter, and here is what you all told me. The first reason people cite is that it's formulaic, it's repetitive, that it all sounds the same, or something along those lines that sort of implies a lack of innovation or interesting creative ideas. And is that true? Well, I am not so sure that it is. If anything, like I said, pop is maybe the broadest genre of all to the point where it's hardly even a genre. For example, pop could mean anything from this to this, bitch got me paying for trips, or this. Bruises on both my knees for you, don't say. And beyond the fact that those are all like vocally driven songs, I don't really think they have a ton in common. As far as instrumentation goes, pop could just use a simple electronic beat, or it could have a full band with guitars, bass, and drums, like that Bruno Mars song. It can be happy and upbeat. It can be sad, like the Halsey song. It can be loud and obnoxious, or it can be quiet and intimate, like Billie Eilish. So as far as the argument that it all sounds the same, I really don't think that holds up at all. Other than the fact that I guess all genres kind of sound the same to people who don't listen to them, like how your grandma thinks that Bring Me the Horizon and Cannibal Corpse are both quote-unquote screamo. Now, as far as innovation and creativity goes, if anything, I would say that pop is the main source of new trends that rock and metal bands oftentimes end up taking inspiration from. For example, Beartooth, who have just like straight up pop choruses, or Bring Me the Horizon, who I would say are arguably the most innovative and popular band of their generation, doing something that to me sounds very clearly inspired by artists like the Kid Laroi. And then in turn, I'm sure there's going to be tons of bands that end up copying that sound from Bring Me the Horizon. And what you'll find if you actually talk to the people in successful rock and metal bands is that a lot of them are actually fans of pop. Or at the very least, maybe they aren't fans, but they can at least respect the craft and skill level involved with pop and aren't afraid to admit it.
What a girl wants, what a girl needs. Christina Aguilera, all day and all night. Come on!
And along the same lines, another common thing that you'll hear people say is that pop is easy to write, that anyone can sit down in front of a laptop and make a pop song. And yes, anybody can pirate a copy of Ableton or FL Studio, install it on their computer, and click some buttons and make some kind of a beat, but that's really a gross simplification. Because anybody that understands songwriting at all will tell you that pop songwriters are arguably the best in the entire world. And where I think a lot of people are confused is that they don't understand the difference between writing a song and playing a song. For example, playing a Taylor Swift song is easy. I probably could have played those songs when I was like 13 years old. But writing a Taylor Swift song is another matter. That is incredibly, incredibly hard, which is why the people that help her write her songs are able to charge tens of millions of dollars for doing that. But for whatever reason, there's this interesting thing where a lot of rock fans place emphasis on technical skill as far as playing your instrument more than they do on songwriting. And the underlying belief there is that music which is technically difficult to play or perform is somehow more valid, which first of all, I just don't agree with on sort of a conceptual level. But also the truth is that a lot of pop is actually very, very technically demanding. The obvious examples there are people like Demi Lovato or Ariana Grande, who have a level of just straight up vocal ability that I think absolutely anybody has to admit is just elite. Not to mention all the old school divas like Mariah Carey or Whitney Houston. Pop vocalists are just top of the food chain. But it's not just the vocalists. The studio musicians and people who play in pop backing bands, like when they do SNL or whatever, or the Super Bowl, these are also just insanely good players. Easily as good as anybody in metal. For example, the drummer Britney Spears, who has played with Usher and Ariana Grande, among many others. The dude is just a monster. And beyond that, from like a structure and theory perspective, there's actually a lot of surprisingly weird progressive stuff in pop songs. I don't know enough theory to do a very good job of listing examples here, but just as one to point to, Adam Neely did a great breakdown of Single Ladies by Beyonce, where he explains that actually the song is kind of weird as hell from a theory perspective.
My interpretation of the chorus to Single Ladies is that it's actually in Mixolydian flat 6. The fifth mode of the melodic minor.
So all of that is to say, the idea that pop is simple music that's easy to write or even easy to play really just doesn't hold up. The next thing that you'll hear a lot is that pop has dumb, shallow lyrics about things that don't matter, like partying and dancing. Which isn't totally wrong, especially if we're talking about pop from before maybe the last 10 years or so. Like there are not a lot of insightful lyrics or messages in like New Kids on the Block, Backstreet Boys, or Britney Spears songs, and if that turns you off, that is totally fair. But since then, really just in the last 10 years or so, pop has evolved a lot. And if I had to point to one person who made pop, for lack of a better word, into quote unquote real music, it would be Lady Gaga, who showed that you could make pop music that was, at the same time, legitimate art, for lack of a better word. So yes, pop may have been kind of dumb and brain dead as recently as the 80s or 90s, or even the early 2000s, but in the post-Gaga world, it really isn't anymore. For example, when you look at a lot of even like really big mainstream artists like Halsey or Demi Lovato, their lyrics are oftentimes actually really dark, to the point where like they can almost be like terror or hate breed lyrics.
All the times I went and fucked it up. I wonder when I love me is enough.
And there's a whole other like parallel genre of artists coming up that I would kind of categorize as alternative pop, who in my opinion have some of the hardest hitting, most brutally dark lyrics that are so heavy that they're honestly kind of hard to listen to at times.
Sometimes I got a hard time seeing the point to existing.
And artists like Kalani, Maggie Lindemann, and my personal favorite Hayley Kiyoko, who talk about gender and sexuality in a really bold, refreshing kind of way that I certainly don't remember hearing from many pop artists back in the day.
If you let them touch you, touch you, touch you, touch you, touch you, touch you, yeah.
So as far as pop having shallow, generic lyrics about superficial topics that don't matter, I would say maybe that used to be true, but these days, not so much. And at the same time, like, can we really say that metal and rock has like super deep, meaningful lyrics across the board? Some bands certainly do. For example, I've talked about Alice in Chains before, who, in my opinion, have some of the best lyrics of all time. But especially in metal, I think honestly, a lot of the time, the lyrics are an afterthought that really don't mean anything at all. And to be clear, there is nothing wrong with that. But if we're okay with it in metal, then we also have to be okay with it in pop, right? And the next common criticism of pop is that it's fake or manufactured, because many of the songs are written by professional songwriters or producers rather than the artist. And there certainly is some truth to that. Like, if you look up the credits for big pop songs, you will start to see a lot of the same names come up. People like Max Martin, Dr. Luke, and Benny Blanco. Like, Max Martin alone has written, I think, something like 25 #1 songs. And if you look at the credits on a pop song, you might see like 5, 6, 7 writers listed on a track in addition to the artist, plus 1 to 3 producers. And sometimes the artist isn't even a writer at all. For example, on Demi Lovato's album Confident, out of 11 tracks on the album, there are 4 where she doesn't have a writing credit at all. Which some people will say that means the music is somehow invalid or illegitimate as a piece of art, but I'm not sure it's that simple. Because kind of the underlying idea here is that for music to be valid as art, the writer and performer have to be the same person. But does that concept really make sense? To look at it another way, in most rock bands, there's usually 1 or 2 people who write almost all the music. It's very rare that everyone in the band sort of writes an equal share of the music. Typically, the 1 or 2 people who write all the music just bring it into the studio, and everyone else just kind of plays what was written for them. And does that invalidate everyone else in the band? If the drummer writes lyrics that the vocalist sings, does that mean the vocalist is a fraud? Should drummers not be allowed to write lyrics? Or what about movies? Are actors frauds because they don't write all their own dialogue? Are directors frauds because they don't operate the camera? Is architecture fraud because architects don't also do the construction? What I'm getting at is that when it comes to art, I just don't think we can expect one person to do everything. Sure, there are these examples where one person can do it all, Caleb from Beartooth, for example, but that's pretty rare. Not everyone who's a great performer is going to be a great songwriter, and vice versa. My favorite example of this is Bonnie McKee, who is an extremely talented songwriter, best known for writing 5 #1 songs for Katy Perry. But when it comes to her solo stuff, it just kind of never really took off. And think about what that means. Like, she's an incredible songwriter. She's proven that she can write hits. She has all the industry connections in the world. But as a solo artist, she barely cracked 150,000 monthly Spotify listeners, which for that genre is not a huge number. Just for whatever reason, she just doesn't have what it takes to be a pop star at the level of Katy Perry, even though she wrote Katy Perry's biggest songs. And then there's people who are the exact opposite of Bonnie McKee. People who are incredible vocalists, guitarists, or drummers or whatever, but maybe they're just not great songwriters. In fact, more often than not, you'll find that people who are great players typically aren't the best songwriters. So doesn't it just make sense for them to work together? The idea that art is only valid if it comes from like this one singular individual who does it all just doesn't make sense to me. Creative projects are team efforts, and if a pop artist gets some help with the songwriting, I personally don't think that diminishes the value of the music. And by the way, a lot of your favorite metal bands, if you look at the credits, you will find that they probably got some help with co-writes as well. And by now, many of you are asking, wait a minute, your channel is called the Punk Rock MBA. You're sitting in front of a wall covered in all these hardcore flyers. Why are you making a video about how pop is great? And the answer to that is simple. To me, the fundamental principle of punk is not listening to some like pre-approved set of bands that someone came up with in 1983 or whatever. It's much more simple than that. To me, punk is about thinking for yourself, not just blindly accepting whatever groupthink or narrative that the cool kids and gatekeepers and tastemakers try to force on you. Which honestly is what is at the root of a lot of this hate for pop, in my opinion. People just sort of get this idea that if you want to be perceived as credible or intelligent or punk or whatever, that you're supposed to hate pop. So they just go along with that to fit in without ever really listening to it or thinking about it and deciding for themselves. I think for some people, there's also some weird feelings about women kind of involved here too, because if you ever noticed that the gatekeeper types always seem to hate what's popular with young women, whether it's Justin Bieber, My Chemical Romance, or Twilight, anything that has an audience made up primarily of young women tends to be the target of a lot of negativity. And so that is really the point of this video. It's not even really about pop per se. The point I'm trying to make with this video is just think for yourself. If you go into this with an open mind, you give it an honest try, and you just decide that, you know what, I just don't like pop, that is totally cool. You don't have to like anything. Just don't hate pop or anything else because somebody told you it wasn't cool to like it and you're scared of what they might think. All right, my friends, that does it for this video. As always, let me know what you think in the comments. And also, I want to thank everyone who supports me on Patreon, especially those of you who support at the True Cult level or above. Patrons get all my podcasts a week early. I do some giveaways. And also, there's a way to have me review your music, artwork, or anything else. Every month, I do a call for submissions. If you want me to review something live on Twitch, just post it in the comments of that thread. Then I will review it live on Twitch and post it on Patreon for everyone to see. So if that sounds cool, hit the link in the description of this video. And with that, I'm going to sign off for now, but I will see you next time.